Good afternoon and welcome to the Future of Israel. I'm Lou Pisco and thank you for having us in your home this afternoon. As you can see, I have my fellow co-hosts Tom and Laura McGuire, so thank you for continuing our program. This is pretty much part 2 of Matthew chapter 7, and we're continuing on the subject of judgments and judging. As you've been with us in our last program, you've heard us talk a little bit about how to righteously judge and how the world and a lot of humanity judges superficially. So we feel that it's a very critical subject that can pretty much cobweb into so many different venues and avenues that if we're not cautious, it can seriously damage not only our lives, but the lives that we create in relationships. So my friends, let's jump a little bit into Matthew 7, but in the portions of verse 24, where it talks about the parable of the two builders and the two foundations.
And we want to preface this with this book was written to the Jews first.
Right.
This was all, and some of them rejected it, and then was go out to the Gentiles. But this, when we read this, this was written by Jews for Jews, and it's applicable to every person that was born. So everything we're saying, and Jesus was a rabbi, he was a, whether they believe you're Messiah or not, Messiah that came, and he was Jewish, and the family was Jewish. And a lot of people don't know that or want to believe that, but that's a fact. So when we read this or talk about it, it's for everyone. And, we're here because we have a heart for the Jewish people to share the truth with them and give them back. They've blessed us so much. The Jewish people have just been, they just came out with a cancer cure that came out from Israel, from Israeli doctor over there, and they think it's going to be applicable in a year. And the blessings that came from Israel to bless all of us have been just over the top of anybody else who's ever done that. So when we say this, we're talking to everyone and talking to the Jewish people. And we start off with,
you bring up an interesting point with that, because to me that's a great example now as to how the Jewish community is trying to create this drug to eradicate a disease that affects everyone. And you would think with the traumatic pasts of the Jewish lineages and citizens, not only of Israel, but the Jews that are also scattered in other countries, you would think that if it was something made by Jewish hands, that they would keep it just in the Jewish community. But here they are freely to give. That's one of the most strongest momentums of love I can think about, coming out of Israel, out of Jewish scientists, to say, here is a drug that we would love to give you to help you combat an illness that affects everyone.
The mainstream media doesn't talk about it because they got a thing against the Jewish people. And a lot of them are Jews.
But it seems
they go against their own, people.
But it seems like it's not just on the Jews that do medicinal work. All of us know, as well as our viewers, we've had countless inventions by Jewish hands, scholars that have written hundreds of books, professors and teachers that have taught and Jewish studies in the synagogues, the temples, and also in the secular colleges. They've given us so much to the world, and so many vast genres of craft. To how to just eliminate them out of the world has always been mind-boggling to me. With us now in the 21st century, and as the viewers have heard me say in the past, we're in the knowledge explosion. And in the 21st century, we've seen so much knowledge increase as time has gone on. And we've also seen judgments, proportion themselves as well. When it comes to the Jewish communities, how would they be able to take And mind you now, we've got the Orthodox, we've got the conservative, and we have the Reformed Jews. And we also have the Messianic, which I'm sure are subdivided in between all three. How do you think they would take judgment through their view, through the Jewish lens, to outsiders? I know it's a heavy question because we don't know how, in essence, a Jewish man or woman thinks compared to us. We can take a calculated guess.
Yeah, it's kind of hypothetical. You know, you could come up, because I know, you know, Jewish friends and how they look at things, and some are the same, and a lot of them are different in their perspectives and how they're looking. But I've been blessed by so many Jewish people in my life that I couldn't do anything else but love them.
Mm.
I actually think that much of the Jewish community is very non-judgmental, because I have to go back to you know, the beginning of time, and all of the pain that they have gone through, and then you move into the Holocaust. So I believe, the people that I know are least judgmental because they were judged, and they're always aware of that. So maybe at times almost to the extreme, but they are less likely to judge anybody in any sect because they had been judged.
Mm.
That's my
Yeah, we talked
personal
about this, and
opinion
I
on
think
that.
it goes to the point of where they're so open that when there's things that are wrong, they still want to let anything go, because, you know, it started off with don't go shopping at this butcher, you know, if you go here, and they'll basically put you out of business for being a Jew and being a Jewish businessman. So it's like, we don't want to put any restrictions on anybody, because, and actually that's what one of the guys I played racquetball with, his father, who passed away a couple of years ago, as a Holocaust survivor, and he went around speaking at the universities. And that was really where he was coming from, because we were trying to get an answer to this. How, you know, why is everything okay when you still have this, and this doesn't say everything's okay?
Right.
right, and now we're talking about Old Testament, the Ten Commandments. So not everything is there. There is a law to be you know,
To be kept.
to be kept.
You know,
Sure.
he gave, the law didn't go out when the Messiah came. The law didn't go out. It's still to keep the law, and the law was for our benefit.
Right.
It wasn't. God didn't want us to have fun. He wanted you. You know, it goes back. The story comes to me, but somebody just talked about it. But they had a playground. The kids were out playing. They had a fence up, and the kids had a great time and played. And they went and they took the fence down, and the kids just huddled and stood around because they didn't know what the boundaries were. So when you know what is good and what is bad, you know what you can do and how far you can go, and you go and you're free in that. You're not free when you don't know. You know, it'd be cruel to not have any rules and regulations. One of the worst things you could do and messes kids up is to not teach them right from wrong. And it gives them that freedom in there to know what to do and what not to do into that. So when they took this fence down, the kids were erect. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know where their boundaries are. Yeah, you know, it goes into where we're going to start with this, the wise and foolish builders. And it says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rock is Messiah that came for our sins. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, yet it did not fall because of its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine, everything we're talking about that comes out of here, words of mine, does not put them into practice, is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with great crash. Amen. When Yeshua finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because his taught is one who had authority, not as teachers of the law. The difference between authority and the law.
Right.
But putting this into practice, when stuff happens, you're going to be still standing when you come out of it if you're on the rock. And the rock is the Messiah, it's
Amen,
God.
amen.
And if you don't put these into practice, it says the foolish, you're foolish. You're either wise or you're going to be foolish. You're going to hear this stuff. So if you want to be wise, you have to know what this says.
So can we comfortably come to a conclusion to say that God had written into the natural law and also into the spiritual law an automatic judgment where it's a guide interwoven and knitted into the naturalness of our surrounding world?
It's a book of love. It's a book of, this whole book is put together because he loves us so much that we can't even comprehend it. And he gave us a manual, and he said, if you want to be blessed or you want to be cursed, and we have a choice.
Right.
Right.
What comes to mind, Laura?
What was the question?
It's open-ended.
It's pretty much
open-ended.
building on a solid foundation and on sand. I kind of always look at it as I'm growing in wisdom with the scriptures. I'm always seeing how the spiritual world blends itself into the natural, and how God made a set of instructions in the natural world to coexist into the spiritual. So it's almost, and so many books come to mind. You've got Job with his experiences. You've got the Apostle Paul going through so many tragic events and shipwrecks. And even for our viewers that read the Holy Scriptures, you know, a lot of in the New Testament with the apostles, when they've gone through traumatic events, being the Apostle Paul that wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, we always read about him being placed in front of Caesar or going on journeys, and you've got shipwrecks, and he's been in the deep for a couple of days. So you would want to think that the natural world is trying to judge him because it's been written in the natural world that it affects everyone.
I think that everything in the natural world is a draw to bring you into the spiritual world of a relationship with the Lord. Everything that on this earth, the domain of earth, good or bad, to me, is wooing you into a relationship with your higher being, the Messiah. Bottom line. So when you walk on this earth in the natural and something's happening, or there's a judgment or whatever, and this goes for countries too.
Sure.
You know, you've taken the laws of God out. The country is going to be, or the world is going to be judged.
And we're seeing that even with a lot of laws now that recently come up with, I hate to always talk about the subject of abortion, because not only can it be political, but it also can be, damaging spiritually.
Correct.
Because of the fruit of the womb being so blessed and I can even say sensual, because it's a creation. And with the Messiah being our author to the divine and being divine to become a fabricator of us, creating us in his image. In how many things in the world do we see that from the Ten Commandments spanning into the old books of the Old Testament and even surpassing the 5 books, the Pentateuch, and into the prophetic books, the Psalmists, the Proverbs, and then jumping into the apostles, so many things around them automatically judged them. They hated Matthew because he was a tax collector. Thomas was hated because of his lack of belief. They stoned Stephen because of the greatness of his faith. So many things around them automatically judged them, where you would think there was a proverbial line always drawn in the sand to say, okay, here it is, where do you stand? Do you stand for us, which is the natural, or do you stand with God, which is the spiritual? And that ugly tug of war always rears its ugly head, where we see now with the lawmakers of our country, and here we are in the Jewish community and in the Christian community to say, please don't do that,
Yes.
because we know the judgments of what's to come.
Correct. Yes.
So how can we be a sounding board and an alarm to say, you've got to stop? And how can we emphasize our voice in that? I know, Tom,
There's a spiritual law. Spiritual laws are natural laws.
Right.
And whether you believe in them or not, they're there.
Right.
And so, go ahead. You were going to ask me something?
I was gonna say, the way you see the young men in your prison ministry, how the laws have judged them, and here you see them as broken vessels trying to rebuild their lives. And you come in with the book of love to say, you know what, God does have a higher purpose for you. He hasn't forgotten you.
There's a better way.
Right, there's a better way. So you're literally rebuilding them out of the book of love. That the world.
In that case, the judgment can be love.
Right.
So they were judged and they were sent to prison, and most of them will tell you, if we weren't here, we'd be dead. We wouldn't make. Somebody would have capped us on the street. Somebody would have. If I didn't get arrested and come to prison, I don't think I'd be alive right now. So that judgment, when you arrest somebody, you're really showing that you care enough about them to stop them from a behavior that's bad.
So in that particular instance, the law saved their life.
The law saved their life. The law didn't go away when the Messiah came. And I said this before, but the Messiah said, "I didn't give you the laws to keep. I gave you the laws to show you can't keep them. You needed a savior."
Right.
But they're still there. But
Yes,
we
but
can't keep them.
those laws are being taken out of the country, and that's where the judgment comes in. If you don't have, again, Old Testament, Moses with the 10 Commandments, 10 Commandments, and those 10 Commandments can be deciphered into so many different areas, which we hopefully still keep in this country, in this world. If you don't have that,
I would have
You know,
hopes that we still keep them, yes.
so therefore, if you're not following those 10 Commandments, then yes, there will be a judgment. For a person in jail, thou shalt not murder or steal. Again, it can also go to the higher of what a country is doing. So once you pull the laws out, anything's on the table.
There's no mirror. If you take this out, you can do anything you want. And why they want to take this out? Because they want to do everything they want.
Right.
And they want to make everything that they want to do is correct, and whatever. There is no truth anymore, and you can do whatever you want. And we don't want anybody to judge us. We don't want to look at anything. We don't want to have a litmus test. We don't have any mirrors. So if we can get rid of this, and this goes back to the beginning of time, if we can get rid of this, then we could feel good about ourselves. But otherwise, our spirit's going to be aggravated because you're going to point something out to me that I don't want to see, because I want to do what I want to do. Human nature, the fall of man from the beginning with Adam and Eve, the fall of man is he wanted to do what he wanted to do, and he didn't want to do what God wants him to do, and we're still facing that. Nothing has changed.
Right, it was that you have that proverbial replacement theology coming into the mix.
So if they could kill the Jews, what they want to do is kill the Jews and the Christians right now. And Rabbi Eckstein, who passed away, saw that the real believers in Yeshua were the best friends of the Jewish people.
Yes.
And he wanted to bring them together, and he did. He brought in over $1 billion to help the Jewish people out, the Holocaust survivors, to bring people back to Jerusalem, because it does say here in the end times that people are going to come back. Jerusalem, in 1948 was in one day, which the scripture says, which is a miracle, was made a country,
Right.
and then bringing the people back, and the Jews are going back, and you see them and they interview them, and they just say, I don't know, I just wanted to come back to Israel. I just wanted to come back, and they're coming back in the droves, because that's been prophesied here, and that's why we try and get people to read the Bible, because if you read this thing, it's not faith anymore. It shows you stuff that was written that's coming to pass, and you'd be a fool not to believe it, because it's right there and it's showing you exactly what's happening.
I'm seeing the Jews recently come from 3 different areas, from the Polish-Russian front, from the Ethiopian region, but also from the regions near Great Britain and Norway.
Really?
So I'm seeing more of a migration coming back from those areas. And you would think, well, how come we don't see a lot of the Jews from maybe the United States or maybe from the Central and South American regions? Why do we always see a large migration come from the eastern portion of the world? With us in the United States, we've got this comfort zone where we have everything. And we hear of so many nations, including a lot of the Jewish communities abroad, that have very little. So now we try and create missionaries. We try and create programs to clothe them, to feed them, a plane ticket to send them back home. That, to me, I would think would be a judgmental way from our hearts, through love, through the channel of love, to say, we want to help you return home. We want to help you become resituated back into your natural world, your natural living, your natural land where you came out of. And all of us know that Israel was the cradle of life that sprung everything, the Middle East.
They're coming from those areas because the persecution is the greatest.
Right.
Persecution is going to increase all around the world, and it's going to increase in the United States. And you're going to see people that are going to leave. The anti-Semitism is not going to go away according to this book. It's going to get worse.
Right.
And the reason why those people are fleeing, and they're leaving Paris, they're leaving France, they're New Britain, they're being, the anti-Semitism is all-time high. And that's where you're seeing them flee first to go back. And I think it's happening, and God's using that to bring them back to fulfill the prophecy that's in here, because it's going to be, it says to the time of the Gentiles comes to an end, and when that comes to be, and then you're going to have the one new man, which Sid Roth talks about, and the one new man is the Jew and the Gentile coming together. There's going to be a time and an explosion, an awakening that we're going to see that's going to be so huge of people coming back and loving the Lord with all their heart, soul, and mind. And I pray every day for Jerusalem. It says to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and I pray that the eyes will be open for the Jewish people, and their hearts and their ears, their mind would be open to see the truth. And and I'll talk about it and say, hey, if you don't think this is the truth, you want to tell me, you're not going to hurt my feelings. We could have the conversation.
Right.
But I believe this is the truth, and I'm praying that they're going to come and they're going to be able to see that. And it's called the one new man because it's the old and the new coming together. And that's going to be the most powerful time on earth before the Messiah comes for the second time.
And you said to make the judgment to help them go back to Israel.
Right.
I wouldn't consider that a judgment. I would consider that just a decision. That's not a judgment. It's a decision to help these people get back to Israel. And there is nothing in the Old and New Testament, that Bible, for Jew and Gentile to harm you. It's all for good and all for love.
How many times have we heard, just in the last few years, that the hate is increasing, the vileness of destroying public property,
Yes, yes.
the
yeah.
Jewish temples, the synagogues, the graffiti, and everything. And the world is trying to systematically judge the Jews from all over the world, and it's not just from the Holy Land. What could we do in our efforts to ramp up to say, and also to alert the Jewish communities that we are here as a help to you.
Right.
We are here as a secondary backup plan to assist you to get you back to where you were, because we do have a heart for you to help you. It was different back in World War II when the Jews were able to immediately see hate face to face because of the trauma of the Holocaust.
Right.
But now we've got so much, and I've got to wrap up because we're coming to the
Yeah,
end
we've
of our
got
show.
2 minutes. And I want to fill this in because we got to wrap it in 2 minutes.
What do you want to
But
say?
this is actually pretty good if you're from the old school. It says the Yeshua, the Messiah, heals many. It says when the Yeshua came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand and the fever left her. She got up and began to wait on him. Now, he healed the mother-in-law. Now, if you go back to the old mother-in-law jokes, this has got to be love. So I thought we'd end.
And again, it started with
serious.
Peter.
Dun-dun.
I thought we'd get that. So he healed
Drum
the
roll,
mother-in-law. And that goes into the guy went to with his mother-in-law and his wife, and they went to Israel, and the mother-in-law passed, and she always wanted to be buried there. And he said, honey, I'll take care of everything. And he went down, and he said, how much is it to bury her here? And he said, we'll do a great job. It's only $2,000. How about to send her home? He says, oh, it's $6,000. Big deal. He said, oh boy, he says, we'll bury her here. He says, what? I thought you said she wanted to be buried here and stuff. He said, listen, 2,000 years ago, you buried this guy. He came back 3 days later. I can't take the chance.
And folks, that's
Well, folks, on that note, well, we want to thank you for joining us on this program. We want to thank you for taking time out to be with us to discuss this critical subject in Matthew 7. In the next coming episodes, obviously, we're going to be continuing into Matthew 8, 9, and 10. And as you know, as you see us unfolding through the Scriptures, there's so much to absorb and to unravel out of the Holy Word. And we also encourage everyone to always read the Scriptures on your own, not to just take our perspectives and our words, but to dive into the Scriptures yourselves so that you could see the beauty and the love that surrounds these words, and also the love of our Messiah. We always want to encourage you that if you have something you want to talk about, send us a letter or send us an email, and right from your heart, tell us what you feel, tell us your concerns and your worries, and once we'll get them, we'll try and return a reply to you either by mail or through the email, or even possibly we can even do a session one time of even discussing some of your questions on air. And we always look forward to being with you, and we thank you again for being with us today. May God cover you always with peace, love, and prosperity, and always know that you do have the Christian community to help the Jewish faith and the Jewish communities as well. And with that, we give you our blessings, and God be with you always.